Hey guys, my name is Cass, and I'm here to help you get started on Autodesk Sketchbook to help you make your own overlays and assets for your episode story. Moving forward, I do have to say this is a strictly PC process only, so this tutorial may not be accessible for everyone. Since I already do have Autodesk Sketchbook installed on my computer, I will not be able to show you a step-by-step process of the installation. But I will still be providing a link for the download in the description below, and don't let that discourage you because the downloading process is actually very simple. I know during the installation process it's going to ask you about your preferences, and I will be going over that with you in the video as well. Also, before we move on, there's another application I highly suggest that you download is Lightshot. And it can be really useful just in case if you can't get direct access to a certain image, and it will help you transfer those images to Sketchbook. Take precaution on the type of images that you do plan on using for your episode story because all images may not be free use. So I'm assuming by this point you now have Sketchbook installed, and what we're going to do first is have our preferences set up. What we're going to go to is edit, and then under edit go to preferences, and under preferences we're going to go to system, and under system we're going to check off the file types TIFF, PNG, and JPEG. I have yet to use the file types bitmap and GIF, but if you feel like that's a possibility in the future that you would use those file types, you can go ahead and check it off anyways. Next tab I would like for you to go to is Canvas. And under Canvas we'll be setting our default canvas size so that every single time we do open up Sketchbook it would always have the same settings. So as you can see, for my width I have it at 1920, the height is 1136, and the resolution is at 720. And if you're familiar with uploading backgrounds to episode, that these are the default measurements for a 3-zone background. And as for the resolution, I came to terms that 720 is the best setting for quality because it's not too high and not too low. And if the resolution is too high, that means that it will probably have a hard time being uploaded to the portal. And if it's too low, the quality will end up looking bad once it's uploaded. So keep in mind these are just default preferences, and these can always be changed. And let's say you are starting a project where you want different measurements, it can be manually changed under the window tab. But I will be going to further detail about that later in the video. The next step I highly recommend is for you to download the brush set. There is a bunch of options and it will be very useful in the future when it comes to making overlays and effects. And what makes this page useful is that if you do have Sketchbook opened right now, if you were to press download on one of these brushes, they would automatically pop up in your brush library. As much as I would love to do a brush overview, I'll probably be covering that in the future in a different video. Now that we have that covered, we can move on and continue to make our own PNG that will soon be an overlay. So for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and open up a file where I'll be using as an example for a background. So I'm just opening up a background so we can have an idea of how much the transparency we are adjusting while making our overlay. We're going to start with a simple image to turn into a PNG, and then it will be converted into an overlay. And the image I recommend to get started on is typically a window. They tend to be in a very uniform shape and very easy to edit. So I know that you can look up for a window PNG and find one by default, but sometimes if you want something very specific, this is a method that I use in order to get access to very specific images. We're going to return back to our default search for windows, and we're just going to look around and see for what we like. And we end up coming across this Lowe's window, and what I like about it is very uniform image. It has a white background and it doesn't have too much unnecessary noise around it. So when you do find these type of images, they tend to be easier to make into a PNG. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to right click it and open the image into another tab to get a full idea of the image. And if you like it, you can begin to right click it and then proceed to click on copy image. So once you have the image copied, what I'm going to have you do is open up another layer in the layer organizer, and you can add a layer by clicking on the plus sign in the top left corner of the tab. And so let's say if you happen to open one too many tabs and you would like to remove one, all you have to do is click and hold on the tab you would like to remove, and then an option should show to delete the layer. And if you happen to delete one too many layers, you can go ahead and go to the top toolbar and click undo, or if you would like to use a hotkey, it would be Ctrl-Z. Now that we have our image, you can go ahead into an empty layer and paste it with Ctrl-V. And you notice the image comes with a lot of unnecessary white space, so with the next steps, I'm going to show you how to remove it. And typically for the method I'm about to show you, it is for very uniform images. So if you happen to have a complex image that you would like to make into a PNG, I will go over that in a different video. So for the next step in the toolbar, I'm going to have you click on the select tool. And now that you have the select tool applied, the next tool I would like for you to select on in that same tab is the magic wand. And what you noticed next to the magic wand is the tolerance. So typically speaking, the higher the number, the higher the tolerance, and the lower the number, the lower the tolerance, meaning how much space it's going to select when you click on an area. You don't really need to adjust this value that much unless you have a very unique image, but since we're dealing with something very simple, I like to keep the values just pretty much in the middle. Now that your magic wand is active, you can go ahead and click on the add option and select on the areas you would like to remove. And what it will do is allow you to select multiple areas at once versus one at a time. And if you would like to zoom in, all you have to do is hold spacebar and drag in and out. And if you would like to rotate, all you will have to just drag left or right. Now that we have the areas that we like to remove selected, all we have to do next is press delete on our keyboard. And for good measure, I like to press delete a couple times because Sketchbook has a tendency to leave behind a couple pixels, so I would just make that a habit going forward. Now that we have our window overlay cleared, it still needs a couple adjustments before we can upload it to the portal. And in order for something to make a window is to add glass. Before we move forward onto that step, I would like to show you another tool, and it's called the Quick Transform. So depending on whatever layer you're in, you can easily expand or minimize the image that you're working on. So as you notice, when you do click on the Quick Transform tool, your cursor changes, and if you click and hold in the middle of the cursor and drag outward, you can expand the image. But if you were to drag inward, you can minimize the image. And if you're not satisfied with the transformation, you can always press undo. And I would always recommend to undo and rather than to transform it back to its original size. Sketchbook has a tendency to diminish the quality of the image that you're transforming if you do it one too many times. So when I do transform items in Sketchbook, I try to make it one and done, but let's say if there's an instance that you would like to experiment with the transformation of an image. Go ahead and go to the layer that you would like to make a copy of. Click and hold and drag over the duplicate layer option. Then once you release, another copy of that layer would appear. And you can go ahead and hide the original image so you don't get confused with the one that you're experimenting on. And then you can go ahead and hide the original layer by clicking on the eye icon, or if you want to take the extra measure, you can also click and drag onto the lock layer option. And if you would like to unlock it, the same idea applies where you click and drag and go back to the unlock. So now that we have a copy of our image, we can go to the layer where our copy is and then go to our toolbar and click on the Quick Transform tool. Now that our Quick Transform tool is activated, we can go ahead and click and drag outward on our image to expand it. So keep in mind there are other transform options such as scale, which allows you to manipulate the image in equal proportions. And if you scale beyond a certain point, the image will begin to invert. So the scaling option can be really useful if you would like to adjust the image in a certain direction without distorting the size too much. Now that we know how to scale an object, the next other transform option is to distort. And while the distort option is active, you can go ahead and pull on the corners of the image to manipulate them at extreme angles. Really useful where you would like for certain objects to appear at certain angles or perspectives. But in the meantime, we'll be focusing on using the quick transform, which allows us to make the image larger or smaller. And so for this instance, what I will be doing is expanding the image to match the size of the canvas. So for the next steps, we're going to continue on completing our window overlay by going below the layer and selecting the area that we would like to fill. And so we're going to go to our select tool, and I'm going to use the first option, which is a rectangular select, which allows you to click and select the area in a square formation. Now that we're satisfied with our selection, we can go ahead and go to our paint bucket tool and choose a color that we would like to use for the glass. And you can simply go to the color wheel in the toolbar and you can begin choosing your color. And so for this instance, I'll be using like a light gray blue color for the window. Now that you have your color selected, you can go ahead and click within the selection to fill the area with the color. So now that we have filled the selection, you can go ahead and unselect the paint bucket tool and also deselect your selection so we can go forward with the next step. So now that we have our glass created, you can go ahead in the same layer, look at that blue bar where you're able to drag the slide up and down to change the transparency of that layer. So depending on what you're going for, you can have the opacity really thick or really dim, but it's simply up to your choice. But to make it look like we're going to have a glass effect, I'm going to just keep it at 50%. And by chance, if you don't want to use the slide, you can input the numbers manually in the layer organizer where the box with the number is located, and you can change it to whatever you like. Just make sure you press the enter key after you input a value or it won't go through. So now that we know how to change the opacity of layers, we're going to go ahead and complete the PNG process. In order to make this an overlay that we can use, we have to make the layers that we don't want to see invisible. So that means I'll be making this layer invisible that contains the room background. So now that layer is invisible, you can see that we just have the window layer and the glass layer. But it's not completely done yet because even though there's nothing, in order for the image to hold its transparency values, we have to remove the background altogether. And you can simply do that by clicking on the eye in the background layer. And so you know that this will be able to uphold its values when the checkered background is showing. So now that our window overlay is basically complete, we can go to File, Save As, then go to the file location where you would like to save it as, and make sure you save it as a PNG. And I highly do recommend making designated file locations because over time it will be really hard to find what you're looking for. So once you found a file location, you can go ahead and press save. Then Sketchbook is going to tell you that for this file format, all the layers are going to be merged, and you're going to press OK. Keep in mind, if you happen to be working on a project where you're trying to make a PNG with multiple layers, whatever layers are invisible is not going to show up in the final product. By chance, if you want to have a copy of it where all layers are available, you can go ahead to File and Save Copy As, then go to File Format and click on TIFF. So what that means when you save a project as TIFF, it just means that it's going to have all the layers it retained the last time you were working on the project. And I kind of gotten into the habit of when I'm working on a project, I always save a copy as a TIFF because it can be really helpful when you need to make a small adjustment in a particular layer without necessarily starting the project all over again. So now that we have saved our project within a PNG and TIFF format, I'm going to go ahead and show you how they look like when you try to open them. So the first file I'll be opening is the one we saved as a PNG. And as you can see, when you open the PNG file, the layers that we worked with are all merged together, and you can go ahead and remove the background to see if it retained its opacity, which it did. So the next file we'll be opening is the TIFF file, and you can simply go to the shortcut under File, then go to Open Recent, where it can show you all the previous projects we worked with. And Sketchbook is going to ask you, do you want to save any recent changes to this project? You're going to press no because we didn't do anything with it, and then it's going to proceed to open the file that we selected. And as you see, when you open a file in TIFF format, it retains all its layers even when they're visible or non-visible. And so it makes it really convenient if you have to make any adjustments to a particular layer. Now that our PNG is complete, we can head to the episode portal and begin uploading it to make it into our overlay for our episode story. And if you made it this far, you probably have noticed that the window looks a little bit different. And during the editing process, I did make a couple adjustments. But since I didn't want to make this video too long, I will be going in further depth on how to add details in another video. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. And I'll definitely will be making more tutorials, so stay tuned. So if you happen to make it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you and I hope to see you in the next one.